Welcome back. The Islamic Monthly features an interesting article about robots. Author Imran Saeed asks, "Can my robot perform Hajj for me?" As robots become more integrated in everyday life, Saeed wonders whether they can be used for worship. How would Muslim scholars navigate this question? What technologies can be used to enhance our ability to worship? Now, Dr. Shabir, this is an interesting question because robots are becoming more and more prevalent in our time. The author mentions that he attended 2 meetings in the same day in 2 different cities across the world by using a robot. And I thought that was interesting. And then he asked, well, can we do the same thing in terms of worship? Let's say if we can't go to Mecca or Medina, can we go use a robot to perform the worship there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and the question arises because the robots have now been developed to the extent that they could be controlled remotely as Imran Said did. He was in Boston and he was controlling a robot that represented himself in Bangalore, and that's halfway across the world. The robot he used it was like a 5'5" tall robot on 2 wheels.
It's called a double.
Called a double, and rightly so, because in a way it represents the controller. The face of the robot is actually an iPad interface, and Saeed was able from Boston to project his facial image into this robot, and also to control the movements of the robot, so that when he's speaking to some people, the robot turns to them, and then speaks to the others, turns to the others. And people get a sense that this person is really present through this robot. In fact, it was developed initially by an MIT graduate who found that his grandmother in another city was not able to attend his wedding. So he had her be present at his wedding through a robot. The robot went around and mingled with the guests, interacted with them, and while the grandmother still in another city had the real experience of being there, well, as real as can be, an experience of being there in the wedding, guests also interacting with her double.
Yeah, they were able to greet her.
Yes, and they felt something of her presence. So with this level of development now, this is the question. Some people, for example, may not be physically capable of making the journey to Mecca, and in the past they would have sponsored someone else, paid the financial requirements to get this person to go on their behalf. Well, can they send a robot on their behalf? Well, this is a question for scholars to answer, and initially the answer will be no, and for a long time the answer will be no. And I don't want to suggest that the answer should be yes, but in terms of a voluntary act, it's always a possibility that one does things. Well, with voluntary acts, we are basically free. Required acts, you have certain stipulations. So you have to go yourself, or you have to send, as traditionally would have been required, send someone else, a real human being. The rationale being that the other human being would perform the kind of juhud or effort on your behalf, whereas for the robot it's effortless, right?
So how important is it that there be a sort of bodily impact on the ritual?
Well, here is the suggestion that if we were to talk about an entirely voluntary act here, like a voluntary pilgrimage or a voluntary umrah, a visit to the house, would one get the sense of actually being there through this robotic control, through an avatar of some sort, if that can be taken to another extent? These are questions, and it seems that yes, rather than being totally cut off from the experience of being there at all, a person who's not physically capable of making that journey, either because they're cut off by war situations or by their own physical incapacitation, then at least they experience some of it. They have some sort of, to me it's like talking to your family over Skype. It's not a substitute for actually being there in person, but at least seeing the face and being able to talk to the other person over Skype is some improvement. And this is an improvement over the time when we could only talk by voice and we could not see the other person. Now with video calling, we're able to see the other person, and it becomes even more real. Society is advancing with all of these technologies, and we should welcome these and accommodate them as much as we can within our ritual settings, in mosques and other settings, to the extent that we can, without violating anything that is core or substantial to our traditional observations of our acts of worship.
All right, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you for that, Dr. Shabir Ali.
You're welcome.
We will take a break, and when we return, we will answer questions we've received from you, our viewers.